What is up, everyone? It is Saturday, October 1st, 2022. We are back with another family education and support group with your host, myself, Param, and I'm grateful to have another opportunity to be here on this platform, providing some information, education, discussions on the topics of addictions, mental health, codependency, the recovery process, communications, boundaries, self-care, and a little bit of everything in between. So for those of you who are here again for the multiple times, like Mr. Jim and all the ones that are going to pop up and say good morning to you. Thank you for being back and making this a part of your Saturday routine. I appreciate it. And for those of you who are here for the first time or are just randomly tuning in, whether it's live or in recording at a later time, I want to say you're welcome here. Keep coming back. I hope that you find what it is that you need in your life and your recovery. A couple things about myself as we wait for the others to trickle in. So, like I said, my name is Param. I'm the weekly host of this. And, Tony, what's up, bro? Tony Dupree. Hold on, I got to put a little Tony up here. Sorry, I saw Jose and Bita. I saw you guys. Jess, what's up? Tony, I got a little excited for because it's been a while since I've seen him. Hope everything's treating you well up there, man. Tony was with us for about 6 years as one of our primary counselors here in a Buckeye Recovery Network, and he finally got the opportunity he was looking for. Someone knocked on the door and gave him the opportunity to be a director up in a facility up in the Bay Area, and he's up there right now doing the thing. And I'm glad everything's good, Tony. I was walking into work yesterday. I saw Jim's car there, the Friday car that he drives, the nice one. And your car was missing right next to it. And I actually thought about you. I just, it's cool to see you right now. So Eileen, what's up from Miami? So like I said, my name is Param. I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I am a licensed advanced alcohol and drug counselor. I'm in recovery myself since June 13th of 2008. Some people call that the sobriety date. I like to also call it the day that I changed my life around because those two things came together. Cataline, what's up? Mom, Dad, what's up? And let's see. I also coach high school basketball. I think it's relevant because I always talk about doing something that brings you passion, and that definitely brings me passion. So today's a talk I've done in the past, but, it's been a long time. And anytime we hear something, again, it's not just the message that's being delivered again. It's who you are and what your personal growth has let you achieve. That when you hear the same talk, it internalizes differently. I've only done this one time, and it was a while ago. So for many of you, it will feel new. And pretty much when a person that's struggling with substance use disorder or a family that has a loved one that's struggling with substance use disorder, they go in this path called the recovery process, right? We always define recovery as to regain something that's been lost, stolen, or destroyed. So you go on this path. And before we embark or embrace anything new, we are human beings and we're really uncomfortable with the unknown. It's called the fear of the unknown. And that fear of the unknown sometimes creates other fears. Some are rational, and many, like the ones today, are irrational. And we're going to talk a little about how those irrational fears can ruin the quality of our recovery. The irrational fears can ruin our sobriety. The irrational fears can ruin our moment-by-moment experience of the present moment. So I got 12 of them for no specific reason. I know that 12 is the magic number in the recovery rooms, but it's just 12 of them in general. And we'll go through them one by one. So the first irrational fear that can ruin your recovery is that everything will change. Everything will change. Well, you know what? Everything will change. And in some cases, everything must change. Because here's the thing, and Jim says this all the time, that if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. So if you're a family member watching this, if you continue acting and behaving and enabling and treating your loved one the same way you did prior to the recovery process, the probability of you getting the same outcome significantly increases. I know you don't want that outcome. I know you don't want the life before they chose recovery. I know you don't want the life that you experienced before they chose recovery. So the only way to change that is to embrace the fact that everything will change. For those individuals who struggle with substance use disorder themselves, they say there's one thing that has to change, and that one thing is everything. You cannot do the same things, go to the same places, engage in the same behaviors, expecting to get a different outcome. It is impossible. So your new life will cost you your old life. Are you willing to pay that price? Some people are, some people aren't. So the first fear is that everything will change, and damn right it will. And everything needs to change. Now, there are some components in our life that might be beautiful and good and valuable, and they add to us, and they don't need to change. But sometimes our relationship to those things needs to change, right? So, for example, if you have a loving, caring family that's supportive, but you've known that you've manipulated and lied and deceived to get what you want out of that family, you have to change and break that pattern of behavior. You have to change the way you engage and interact with the loving support that you have. So, yes, absolutely everything will change. And guess what? Human beings, we don't like change. So there's a dilemma, and it's on its own, that if you do not like change, and I'm telling you that everything's going to change, there is a chance that you're going to have a hard time with the recovery process. Because we like to do what is comfortable. We like to do what is familiar. We don't like to do what is uncomfortable. We don't like the fear of the unknown. So we just stay the same. But here's the thing, my friends. I mean, there's a lot of experience watching this. What in life doesn't change? I mean, I like to look at nature, right? Like that's my thing. I like to look at nature, and I see nature showing us, teaching us in a moment by moment, in a week by week, in a month by month, in a season by season experience that life changes all the time. Damn right, Tony. Change is the constant in life. And where do we know that? I'm telling you, just watch nature. Nature, we are a part of nature. We do what nature does. However, we don't like to embrace that. So the next one is, it says that you are going to fail. That's an irrational fear, because then you got to define, what does failure mean? In my opinion, not trying something new, not embracing a new experience, not getting uncomfortable, that is the ultimate form of failure, because you quit and fail before you even have a chance to give yourself an opportunity to succeed. What's up, Julian? And who says failure has to be deemed failure? I mean, there's a phrase I use here. A lot of you have heard it, is in life, when you try something to the best of your ability and you fall short and you fall down, in that moment, you actually fail forward. You don't fall backwards, you fail forward. When you get up from failing forward, what happens is you make a little bit of progress from where you were to where you've fallen. That progress right there changes everything. That progress changes everything. You know, there's a good definition that I have for success and failure, and it says, going from one failure to a next failure without losing any type of steam or momentum, that is the definition of success. To go from one perceived failure to another perceived failure without losing the motivation, the momentum, the commitment to continue moving forward, that is success. Hard to do, but it's success. Jim, what'd you say here? If we continue in our recovery, don't concern yourself about change. Change will come as we progress. Yeah. Some people they hyper focus, right? That's a better way to put it. They hyper focus on all the changes that are going to happen. You know, screw that externalizing and internalize and do the work. And what happens is when we change, we are able to handle the change that comes around us. And that is a form of progress, as Jim calls it right there. So, the next one that we have here is you will actually succeed. So people might be saying, like, what's so afraid of succeeding? Well, there's a lot of people that come through the recovery programs that their self-esteem is this big. Their self-worth is this big. To someone who has that self-esteem as a foundation, any type of success, any type of achievement, any type of accomplishment, they get overwhelmed by it because their self-esteem is so low, and they feel like it's going to break on them. A lot of times people come into recovery, and because of who they were and how they lived their lives prior to getting sober, if they lied, if they cheated, if they stole, if they got arrested, if they hurt people, all that kind of stuff. When they come into recovery, they don't just say, oh, I'm just going to embrace this new life. They feel like they are an imposter. It's called the imposter syndrome if you want to look it up. They feel like that's not who they are. Like when they raise their hand and they're telling the truth, they're like, ooh, I'm uncomfortable with that person. And it terrifies them. I know you might think that, how does this make sense? But I've sat across the chair with enough people to hear them say that they get afraid of succeeding, terrified of success. And there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of fear. So in family members, by the way, let's just rewind those few back, everything will change. Absolutely. Your life's going to change when it comes to recovery. You can't be the same mom, dad, grandma, spouse that you were in the past if you want to have a new relationship with someone that's changing. You probably will fail or perceive failure, because as soon as your loved one has a relapse, or as soon as your loved one has a behavior relapse, you feel like you're not doing this thing right, or you feel like, what could you have done differently? And sometimes family members, by the way, they have a fear they're going to succeed. This is a really sick mindset, but it happens a lot. When a mom or a dad will just go with, and this could be anybody, right? It could be grandparents, it could be whoever is the person that's just the most engaged with addiction. What happens is when their loved one finds recovery and gets sober, for example, all of a sudden they don't have the same relationship they had before. Because what was the relationship before? To fix, to solve, to rescue. Well, what if there is nobody to fix, no problems to solve, and no one to rescue? That's scary. I've had moms and dads, and this is going to break your heart for some of you, because this is just something that the ones that are watching this show, you would never do. I've had moms and dads tell their kid, adult child under the age of 25 years old, I liked you more when you would drink with us. I liked you more when you smoked with us. I liked you more when you would have fun with us. You're boring now. Hey, you used to have a problem with opiates, but here, have this beer. I know you never had a problem with drinking. We're celebrating. Have a bottle of champagne. Parents do that stuff because guess what? When their kids start succeeding, they lose an identity. Let's see what Tony said. Most successful people have failed more than they have succeeded. Absolutely. So it goes back to that quote, Tony. Success is defined as how you go from one failure to another failure without losing any momentum. Right? I coach high school basketball. When we lose a basketball game, the kids are down, their shoulders are rolled, their affects messed up, they're borderline depressed, at least for the day. And how fast can you go from that feeling to getting prepared for the next game before the next game happens? Because if you don't bounce back from that loss, the next game is pretty much guaranteed to not go in your favor. Cataline said, we get fearful because the expectation bar has been raised. I get excited for that, Cataline, because here's the thing. What was our expectation while we were drinking? Expectation was this low. I mean, the bar, there was no bar. It was the floor. It was just getting up off the bed was the expectation of life. Just getting out of bed, just being somewhat productive. The bar was so low. Now in recovery, the bar comes up. And guess what? Instead of looking at that as like, oh man, how am I going to reach that? Be like, hell yeah, I have a new bar that's finally to the level of my own expectation of myself. Set that thing for yourself. I always say, don't raise the bar, set the bar. Set it somewhere that you know that you can walk into and feel successful for. So, what do we got next here? Number 4, you won't know who you are anymore. Now, this one happens to family members also. We just shared about it a little bit. Most family members who have a loved one that's struggling with mental health or addiction, they call themselves the caregivers. They call themselves the one who rescues, the codependence, as we talked about last time. You've created an identity of that's who you are. And if you watch this week by week, you will see I've outlined a way that you think it's happening just because of addiction. But for those of you who are caregivers and caretakers, you've been a caregiver and caretaker for your whole dang life. You're 9 years old and you have to be a parent. You're 12 years old and you took care of siblings. You're 16 years old and you're being, cleaning the house and doing laundry and all that stuff. Don't tell me just because now your spouse or your child has addictions that all of a sudden you became a caregiver. I know that's not the case. You could say that's the case, but you won't know who you are anymore when there's no one to care of. And that's a beautiful place to be. because the canvas becomes blank. You can actually create who you want to be. And my question that I have to anybody that says, hey, I'm afraid of recovery because I don't know who I'll be. Here's my question. Did you ever truly know who you were? And I know some of you that are in recovery, you've got to the root of that and you're okay with who you are now. But most people in life, the 8 billion people walking this planet, it's not like people stop and pause to figure out who they are. They just identify with the labels they have, the job they have, the relationship status they have. Are they a father? Are they a mother? Are they an employee? Are they a friend? We identify ourselves with these roles we have to the external world. Not many people really know who they are. So I think that instead of worrying about not knowing who you are in recovery, be excited of finding out who you are. What your values are, what your character is all about. Get to know yourself intimately, like you're getting to know something or someone that you truly love. The next one that I have, I found out who I'm supposed to be. There you go. Jim didn't find this out magically, by the way. So I always blow up Jim's not confidentiality, but I break Jim's. I don't care. I just share whatever I want about him because he's open. Jim struggled as a substance abuser. We'll call it drug addict, to the point that he was street bound. And when I say street bound, living homeless for not a few days, but for significant amounts of times that turned into years. And I will tell you this, that, I'm going to say something to you, Stacy, in a second, but Jim didn't just magically pop up and find out who he is. He did the work. He did the work on himself. And guess what? I promise you, even at that point, he didn't find out who he truly is. So despite of going through all the steps for himself, he didn't truly get there until he started doing the work with others. Jim's like the matriarch of a sponsorship family that has a lot of individuals who've found recovery through that circle, the 12-step circle. But when you walk other people through the steps and you walk other people and heal them and help them and guide them, more gets revealed for yourself. You get to know who you are more, right? So it's a constant process. And I promise you this, 5 years from now, there's going to be more layers unveiled about who we are. Julian, I'm going to read yours in a second. I just want to respond to Stacy's. Good morning, Parm. I'm in Cali. Oh, well, good. Happy you're in Cali. I know you're an East Coast person. Excited to be here and celebrate Anthony's 5 years. Damn. Well, for those of you, congratulations, Stacy. I want you to know that you not giving up on Anthony when Anthony had given up on himself was one of the main reasons that you get to be here 5 years later celebrating it. I know Anthony did the work himself. I know he's grinded, and I've been a part of that entire journey, and a lot of credit to him. But the credit prior to that credit was because of you and your family. And if you guys have never seen, I've done a conversation with Anthony and his brother about sibling dynamics in the relationships and recovery. It's one of the live streams. So if you go back a little bit and you go back, you'll be able to find what was in there, which is pretty interesting. So Julian, let's see what you said. Playing the savior can be destructive when you have no one to save you. Begin to look for broken people to surround yourself with, or you find a new dynamic to fall into, either positive or negative. Wow. So playing the savior can be destructive when you have no one to save you. So a lot of times people who are broken and hurt, what they do is they go and they try to help other people prior to helping themselves. And it's beautiful at first because you feel like you're making an impact. But over time, when you realize that the helper doesn't have the foundation needed to help many people, all of that help and that work, it crumbles down and crashes on the shoulder of the helper. That's why there's a lot of, we call it burnout in the field of human services and caregiving and taking and counseling and nursing and all that stuff. Because oftentimes those people are really well-intentioned and they come from a background that has called them to help others, but they don't do the work on themselves. And then Julian said here in a follow-up, you can't fully know who you are until you ripped off the masks of the different faces you wear to survive and begin to live with the authentic version of which is always evolving. You're really well written, Julian. You're writing pretty good now. But yeah, it's, I do this talk when we get a little bit closer to Halloween about the masks we wear. And we constantly are wearing these masks to hide ourselves from the world and hide ourselves from others. But what happens in that case is we're also hiding ourselves from ourselves, right? So until you rip off those masks, and sometimes there's a lot of fear with that. There's a lot of anxiety with that. There's a lot of, if I rip off and show the world who I am, are they going to like me, right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes there. Well, Hussein, it's good seeing you guys the other night. Thank you for the thoughtful stuff you guys got me. Building a very solid foundation is an essential tool for helping others. Yeah, so it goes back to what Julian just said right now. When you're helping others, you got to make sure that you are on solid ground. You got to make sure that your foundation is very, very strong, very strong. Because like I said, the more people you try to help, the stronger that foundation has to be, or it will all break down like a house of cards. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. The next one I got here is one of the fears that people have is that you will be bored. Well, if you're trying to get sober and you're worried about being bored in sobriety, here's my counter thing to you is, that's telling me that you're assuming that alcohol and drugs equals fun. Well, if you're being honest with yourself, for those of you who've struggled with addictions, don't tell me the last days, weeks, months, years of your addiction was fun. It's misery. It's miserable. There is no fun with it. Maybe the first few days, weeks, months, years were fun, but don't be a liar and think, oh, it was fun. There's nothing fun about stealing to get substances. There's nothing fun about getting high and getting by. There's nothing fun about active addiction. Sobriety is actually where the fun is. Recovery is where the fun is, because anything and everything is possible. I just did this group this morning for our program participants, and some of them said, yeah, I couldn't even go on an airplane to go to Europe with my family because I couldn't take drugs with me. Like, they missed out on an opportunity to go to Europe because they were so addicted to drugs. Don't tell me that stuff's fun. You know, the next one, number 6, is you will lose your friends. Yeah, I mean, actually, you know what? Instead of saying you'll lose your friends, you know what's going to happen? You're going to find out who your friends are. Because, again, in addiction, there's something called friends and friendships, and there's something called using buddies and acquaintances. When you get sober, you'll quickly realize which one falls into which bucket. And you might even realize that who you thought were your friends were actually just using buddies and acquaintances. But there are a few people that'll stand out, that'll be loving and caring and supportive, and you might have even used drugs with them, you know, but they never took it to that next level. So it's really important to really distinguish which one's which, and then go all in on the friends, the people that really care, friends, family, go all in on them, because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing we have. Jim, what'd you say? Boredom is the onset of peace and serenity. We just don't know how to embrace it yet. Yep. Because we always talk about this too, Jim, is boredom is, for some people, overwhelming at first because they have to sit with themselves. And if you're not comfortable with who you are, then you're not comfortable with sitting with yourself. Therefore, you think it's the boredom that's getting at you, when in reality, it's the inability to sit with oneself. That's deep if you understand what I just said right there. So, you know, a lot of times in early recovery, people are worried about boredom and what's going to happen there. It's not the boredom that's the problem. It's the inability to sit with oneself, with one's thoughts, with some emotions, with feelings, and all that kind of stuff. Your past, your future. It's just a tough place to be. The next one says people won't like the sober you. Well, first you have to distinguish between reality and delusion, because people won't like the sober you is assuming that people like the using you. People don't like anybody that's using substances to the point that it's impacting their relationships, their jobs, their finances, their health. People like authenticity, like Julian said. People like human beings that show up unapologetically as who they are, right? With a clear mind and a clear mindset, and they own their life experience. There's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, or it's like an essay, some dude really, really smart that writes really well. He says, to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. And we're always trying to be something or someone we're not, because we think that's what the world wants us to be, when the world only wants and requires and needs us to be our truest version of ourselves, right? To thine own self be true, something we learned in the program. Number 8 says you won't be able to handle your emotions without drugs and alcohol. This is actually a legitimate fear. So I know a lot of these are like irrational fears. This one, there is some legitimacy to it, because here's the thing. When a substance abuser started to use substances then and there at a previous time in their life, when they're adolescents, young, when they felt fear, they used substances. When they felt anxiety, they used substances. When they felt depressed, they used substances. When they felt anger, they used substances. They used drugs and alcohol to cope with overwhelming emotions. There is nothing wrong with that on the surface level, because it makes sense. It helps the person achieve temporary relief for an emotion that's overwhelming. Okay? For an emotion that's overwhelming. Now, if they continue to do so over a period of time, for years, decades, now you stop the use of substances, and now they're sitting with themselves, and they start to feel anxiety, fear, anger, sadness, all that kind of stuff. They have nothing to help them cope with it. And they think that they're not going to be okay. When in reality is, if someone experiences, let's say, an emotion like sadness, if you don't use the substance and just use coping skills, strategies, techniques you can learn in support groups, you can learn in therapy, you can learn in outpatient groups and all that kind of stuff. And just to sit with the emotion. What you learn is the emotion comes and goes like everything else in life. It's the decisions we make or don't make when we're feeling those highs and lows that dictates the quality of our life. And yes, Kathleen, I'm just going to, you nailed it on the head. For sure, alcohol was a crutch for a long time. A crutch is also meaning a coping skill, to be honest with you, okay? Because if you think about it this way, if someone's broken and they're using a crutch, it's actually helping them. Until it became an obstacle. Because once it stops helping anymore, what was at one point the solution to the problems is now the accelerator to the problem. So not only is the emotion still there, substances gets the emotion and magnifies it and just blows it up into levels that lead people to major depressive disorder, lead people to suicidal ideation, lead people to drug-induced psychosis, lead people to panic attacks from overwhelming and overbearing anxiety. And it completely does a whole different twist. So well said, Kathleen. Number 9, we're just trucking through here, is people will judge you for being sober. Or in the family's cases, people will judge you for being in recovery. How many family members come to situations like this, and with other people in their lives, they try to keep it low. I don't want anyone to know I'm in recovery. I don't want anyone to know our family has an issue. I don't want anyone to know that my son or daughter is addicted to fentanyl or heroin. They bring their voices down because there's so much shame, because they think that people will judge them. Well, I have a news flash for you. People will judge you regardless. The same way you judge people regardless. Now, sometimes our judgment isn't like a negative connotation. You might say, oh, that's a wonderful person. That person is very insightful. That person is very compassionate. All of those are judgments. See, we think that judgment is just a negative connotation. Oh, that person's a bad parent. That person messed up their life. That person has a drug addict in their family. We're worried about the negative judgment, but if someone says that person's a good parent, we get excited. Everyone is judging at all times, my friends. Don't consume yourself with it. Embrace your authenticity. If you have a loved one in your life that's struggling with addiction, own it. Because if you don't own it, you are furthering the stigma of addiction, saying it's not okay to have someone who struggles with addiction. If you have a loved one that's struggling with serious bipolar disorder and they're on medications and they fluctuate all the time and they're causing havoc in your life, don't be the person to say, oh, I don't know, my kid's just moody. Own it. Because if you don't own your own life, you are furthering the damn stigma of saying mental illness and addiction is bad. And it's shameful. And it's not to be talked about. Let's see what Jim said. I am so glad people accept recovery more today than 20 years ago. It will even get better. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's obviously, Jim, I wasn't around in the recovery world at that time, but I've read enough. Sorry, I gotta plug my laptop in so my microphone might get a little bit. Sorry, guys. Hold on one sec. I just want to make sure. Okay, so it's good. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So the part that Jim says about, hey, I'm glad that there was a significant stigma on this stuff a long time ago. And people weren't even talking about this. There's someone that I always talk about. His name is Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He gets such a bad rap from like the younger community. They say all these horrible things about Mr. Rogers when he is probably one of the most fascinating human. Like he's like in my top 5 fascinating humans of all time. In the 60s, he was talking about mental health. In the 70s, he was talking about mental health. He was talking about communication with children, how to make it okay to talk about emotions, how to make it okay to talk about the differences in our society. I mean, when racism was at its freaking peak, right? Like the civil rights movements, when racism was at its peak, he had a show that he sat down with himself and an African-American gentleman in a little kiddie pool, and they had their feet in there. And the kids were coming and asking him questions like, how are you guys doing this? Why are you guys doing this? And he would have open conversations about it. Mental health and addictions is the same way. We are getting to the point that it's becoming more mainstream and people are talking about it. But if the people in the recovery process are afraid to own their own reality and own the fact that they're in recovery, then we don't stand a chance. We don't stand a chance. We're all human beings in recovery, man. We all have something we're recovering from. Let's see. Yeah, and okay, this is a good. Thank you, Eileen, for I just talk so rapid speed that I don't distinguish things, but there can be a confusion in what's sharing privacy of the loved one and what can cross boundaries oversharing when not appropriate. So it's if you don't want to violate someone's boundaries of what to talk about in regards to them, the solution, in my opinion, is simple. Talk about your own recovery. Just talk about your own recovery. It's something as simple as I found the rooms, or I found recovery through a loved one. Sometimes we call it a qualifier. You don't have to say who that loved one is. You don't have to say who that person is. Someone really important in my life helped me find recovery. And from that moment on, just talk about yourself. You don't have to break down who that person is and what relationship they have to you. But once you start talking about your own recovery and saying, hey, I came in this recovery world because of someone else. I'm staying in this recovery world because of myself, because I found out that I was X, Y, Z, and I needed to grow and evolve and all that kind of stuff. You own that experience. So that's a great observation there, Eileen. And I think the solution to that is to not have the need to be specific about who that person is. I mean, in some circles, and in some circles, when talking with like, when a bunch of people that identify, you could say it's a specific person in your life because other people are doing the same thing too. So I hope that helped. Number 10, it says you will never be able to fix your mistakes. I don't know. I never say never, but the reality it is sometimes some things that happen in the process of life, not that they can't be forgiven, but sometimes they're not forgotten. There are certain things that we do to others in our lives and others do to us and this and that sometimes you can't make all the wrongs right. For example, if I made an amends to somebody and they told me I don't accept your amends and I'm still pissed off at you, I've done my part. And I leave that conversation saying, well, you know what? I need to make sure that for the rest of my life, I continue to make living amends and not do to others what I did to this person. And I continue to make it right for myself. And one day that person may or may not come around. You may or may not be able to fix your mistakes. There's some parents that know looking, like at the time, they did the best they did with what they had at the time. But now they look back and say, gosh, I wish I would have done it differently. Sometimes you can't change those. All you can do is change it moving forward. So, number 11, we're almost through here. You got two more. Number 11 says sobriety. Oh, no, it says it's always going to be a battle for the rest of your life. It's always going to be a battle for the rest of your life. I don't agree with that. Okay. I know some people say that, it's hard forever. You know what? Life is a battle. Okay. So recovery just happens to be a part of that whole life thing. But when you have discipline and when you have a foundation and when you have a routine, it becomes easier. For example, I wake up at 4:30 every day and I'm at the gym at 5:00. Okay. And I'm working out from 5 to 6. I do some cardio. From 6 to 7, I lift. I come home, get ready, go to work, whatever it is. For me, that's easy. It's not easy. It wasn't easy for me in the beginning, though. In the beginning, it's like, I don't want to get up out of bed. Oh, it's still dark outside. It's cold. It's too, I barely slept. Why would I can go later. I can go tomorrow, whatever it was. All these like conversations we have with ourselves. But now, because of the discipline and the routine, I get up at 4:30, go to the gym. It's nothing. Now, recovery the same way. In the beginning, I have to go to all these meetings. I have to read these books. I have to go be of service. I have to work on myself. I have to heal my inner child. I have to not care about my feelings, just focus on my actions. I have to continue moving forward despite of not wanting to, all that kind of stuff. In the beginning, it's like, oh my God, it's like going to the gym at 4:30 in the morning. It's hard. But for those people watching this, I know there's a few of you that have been sober for a while. There's not things that happen that challenge our recovery. There's life events that happen that are overwhelming. But if you have the routine down and you have the discipline down, I promise you it's not a battle. It's just like it is what it is and you go through it. So please remember that. And family members the same way. If all this is hard for you in the beginning, it's because you don't have a consistent disciplined routine yet. Once you have it, it becomes easier. So one of the fears that people have is that it's going to be a battle for the rest of their lives, man. It's just, with a foundation, it's not a battle. It's just another day. And the last one, it says, it's just too hard. It's just too hard. Well, you know what? Life is hard. Being addicted is hard. Working on yourself is hard. Going to the gym is hard. Not going to the gym is hard. Being single is hard. Being in a marriage is hard. Everything in life is hard. But here's the thing. When there's only two options in life, one is either regret, right? Or it's either discipline. So either when things get hard, you're disciplined enough to take the action, or when things get hard, you don't take any action and you're left with regret. The weight of discipline is ounces. Ounces. The weight of regret is tons. Right? So being disciplined and doing something is actually the easier route. And, there's so many people that, our program participants come into these rooms and they have all these reasons why it's too hard. I don't have a job. I don't have money. My family doesn't talk to me. I've done this before in the past. It didn't work. I don't, I'd rather just drink and try this on my own. Whatever it is, it's just too hard. It's too hard. Well, you know what? If you think it's too hard, you're probably right. And guess what's going to happen? You're going to keep proving things to yourself and proving to others that why it was so hard. And you're just setting yourself up for the inevitable relapse, saying, you know what? It was because of X, Y, and Z. That's why I relapsed. No, it's not. Find reasons why it's not as hard. Find reasons why it's worth it. Find reasons why it's beautiful. Like going through a series of events with a collective group of people that are like-minded. It's so much easier than going through it on yourselves. So there we go. Thank you, Jim. Jim's been very on point today. He always is, but I did not think I could succeed in the beginning, but facing the challenges and learning from failure, I enjoy living today. Yeah, I mean, it's not an odd thought for Jim. So remember, I painted that background. Jim was, caught up with the law, living on the streets like a street creature. He eventually got into this thing called drug court, which is a wonderful program. It's hard as hell on every imagination possible. It's very hard, but he got into drug court. I mean, that person sitting inside of a drug court room saying that, hey, you have to do this treatment or else we're going to lock you up. It's hard to imagine that person saying, yep, I could do this. In the beginning, they're terrified of this process. It's like, can I really do this? But one day at a time, going from learning from obstacles in life and from failure without picking up, you realize that not only can I do it, but I will do it and I can do it. So this is all wonderful. So these 12 fears, man, I hope it doesn't ruin your recovery because, like I said, they're irrational fears, even though we think they're rational. And I hope that the quality of your recovery right now continues to improve day by day by not feeding into these fears and just embracing the beauty that exists in the recovery process, which is the possibility of human transformation. You know me, I don't do these talks unless I believe in the possibility of human transformation. And for all the family members, I don't know if this would work. I'm posting a link here. See if you can click on it. It's like a Google link. So if you have the time, I would really appreciate it if you can go on our Google page, the Buckeye Recovery Network page, and leave a review but about your experience about the family program. So some of you I think have done it in the past and some of you haven't. But if you go to our Google, Google My Business or whatever it is and add a review, write a review, specifically talk about how the family education support group has helped you or your family or what you've gained out of it. I would really appreciate that personally, as I'm really trying to just get it a little bit out there, a little bit more to provide more support. And I think Google reviews are a really nice way to do it. While you're there, check out our Google reviews in general. Those are all real reviews from real program participants. It is by far the most beautiful representation of who we are and what we do. And yeah, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Love and appreciate all of you. I will see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye, everyone.